Hello friends, notes on English literature, 16th and 17th century poetry. Selected poems of Andrew Marvell to his Mistress, The Definition of Love. Short questions with answers, short questions 1 to 9. Question 1. What is the rule of time and fate in human life as you find in Marvell's poems? Answer, Andrew Marvell's poem to his Mistress and to the definition of love are among the great metaphysical poems of love. Both the poems display the poet's attitude to love in relation to time and fate. To his Mistress shows the fleeting nature of time, the quick passing of man's youth, and the past eternity which lies empty and buried in ahead of man. In the definition of love, the poet says that their love, being perfect and divine, is unattainable, and fate is always hostile to this kind of love. Perfect lovers are never permitted by fate to be united. The idea is that the poet's love implies a spiritual union but a physical separation. Fate makes perfect love impossible of realization. Thus, man is a victim of time and fate. So the role played by time and fate in human life is very significant. Question 2. What do you mean by carpe diem theme? Answer, carpe diem, a Latin phrase, literally means seize the opportunity. The full meaning of the phrase is enjoy the present moments without caring for the future. It is a common theme on which poets of different ages wrote their poems. Robert Herrick's poems, Gather Your Rosebuds While You May, or John Masefield's Love and Be Merry, or Andrew Marvell's To His Mistress, are written on this theme. In all these poems, the poets, by means of arguments, uphold the Epicurean philosophy of life. The poet in this case argues in favor of sensual pleasures in life, showing the short and temporary stay of human beings on earth. In To His Mistress, the lover offers a strong plea to his beloved to soften towards him and relax her rigid attitude of puritanical reluctance to grant him sexual favors. The carpe diem theme of this poem is presented by evocative statements based on logical arguments. It is further illustrated and made vivid by means of metaphysical wits and concepts, giving rise to real concrete images, but by hyperbolical expressions. Question 3. How does Marvell propose to his beloved to enjoy life To His Mistress? Answer, the poet-lover tries his best to win the beloved's mind in various ways. He argues her to shake off her shyness and enjoy the youthful pleasures of life. He argues, saying that her coyness would have been justified if they had enough space and time at their disposal. But in fact, time is passing at a very fast speed, and eventually they will have to die and enter the eternal world of the dead. Therefore, it would be appropriate for them to enjoy the pleasures of love rather than suffering the pangs of unsatisfied love. The lover further proposes to his beloved that they should enjoy the pleasures of lovemaking with all their energy and vigor. The whole idea is that the lovers would invade life and time with the violence of their lovemaking. The lovemaking is not to be of the ordinary, common kind, which is generally characteristics of weak and anemic people. The passion of the lovers is intense and ardent. They will tolerate no obstacle in their way, but will extract the maximum possible pleasures from their lovemaking, and their pleasures, like their passion, will be of fierce kind. The lovers cannot stop the passage of time, but they can at least quicken its speed so as to enjoy it as much of pleasures as possible. Question 4. How does the poet present the shortness of human's life in the poem To His Mistress? Answer, To His Mistress of Andrew Marvell deals extensively with the poet's concept of time and shortness of human life. This brevity of man's life has been projected by means of logical arguments, concepts, and hyperbolical expressions. Addressing his beloved who refuses to grant him sexual favors on account of her modesty and shyness, the poet says that her coyness would have been justified if they had enough time and space at their disposal. But in that case, she might roam by the side of the Gangas in India, searching for pearls on its banks, and the lover might sit by the banks of the Humber in England and mourn the fact that his beloved does not respond to his protestations of love. The lover then would be content to spend hundreds and thousands of years in admiring and adoring various parts of her body. He would patiently keep on loving her to the very end of the time. But the poet instantly refutes the possibility of a long life and clearly shows the uncertainty and shortness of human life with the help of a metaphysical concept, giving the image of time's winged chariot hurrying near. In fact, time is passing at a very fast speed, and eventually the lovers will have to die and pass into eternity. After some years, her beauty will no longer be found on this earth. She will lie in her grave where worms will attack her long-preserved virginity. All her honor will then turn into dust, and all her desire to make love to her will there turn into ashes. Thus the poet proves the shortness of human life on earth. Question 5. How does Andrew Marvell explain the concept of fleeting of time and its enjoyment, or what is the role of time in human life? Answer: To His Quiet Mistress of Andrew Marvell is a wonderful poem displaying the poet's attitude to love in relation to time, addressing his beloved who refuses to grant sexual favors on account of her modesty and sense of honor. The poet says that her coyness would have been justified if they had enough time and space at their disposal. In that case, she might roam by the side of the Indian Gangas, searching out pearls on its banks, and the lovers by the banks of the Humber in England and complain against his beloved who does not respond to the protestations of love. The lover would be content to spend hundreds of thousands of years in admiring and adoring various parts of her body. He would patiently keep on loving her to the very end of time, but this is not possible because time is passing very quickly, and eventually both of them will have to face desires of past eternity after death. So they should enjoy the present moments as much as possible. The poet, through this poem, has given us a comprehensive idea of the passing of time, of the passing of our youthful gaiety and vigor. Question 6. How does Marvell combine emotion and reason in the definition of love? Answer: Like Donne, Marvell blends passion with intellect and reason. While he expresses his passion of love, he uses witty and intellectual concepts and logical arguments. The definition of love is a notable example of the argumentative love lyric. The poem begins with an intellectual concept. He says that his love was begotten by despair upon impossibility. Magnanimous despair alone could show him so divine thing as love. He could have achieved the fruition of his love, but fate drove iron wedge and placed itself between him and his beloved. Fate grew jealous of the two perfect lovers and did not permit their union, because the union of the two lovers would mean the ruin of the power of fate. In the next conceit, the poet says that he is far away from his beloved as the two poles are from each other. This love can be fulfilled only if the earth undergoes some new convulsion and if the world is crammed into a planisphere. Then the poet compares his and his mistress's love to two parallel lines which can never meet if stretched into infinity. This is also a wonderful concept. Finally, he describes the love between him and his beloved as the conjunction of mind and the opposition of stars. And this is certainly an intellectual concept. Thus, the whole poem is a kind of logically developed arguments in which passion itself is almost forgotten, and the speaker's chief concern is to establish the utter hopelessness of true love. Here we note that Eliot calls unified sensibility a peculiar blend of passion and thought, emotion, and intellect. Question 7. What is the nature of love between the poet and his beloved in the poem? The definition of love. Answer. The poem between the love between the poet and his beloved is perfect and divine. As perfect love always remains unfulfilled, the poet regards it as union of the two minds but separation of the bodies. It is also known as platonic love. By means of various analogies and arguments, the poet shows the rarity of the love existing between himself and his beloved. There is no possibility of any physical union between them. He says that because of jealousy, fate has never allowed him to be united with his beloved. A union between the two lovers will be a fatal blow to the power and authority of fate. Surely, fate has placed these two lovers as far as possible from each other as the North Pole and South Pole are. These lovers can never come together in spite of the fact that they are the center around which the whole world of love revolves. Using geometrical images, the poet says that as only oblique lines can meet each other in all geometrical angles, similarly, only guilty and illicit lovers can have the fulfillment of their passion. The love of the poet and that of his beloved are like parallel lines which can never meet even if they are infinitely stretched. Thus, the love of the poet and his beloved is only a union of the minds but can never take the form of a physical union. This love may be defined as the conjunction of a mind and opposition of the stars. Question 8. What role is played by fate in the definition of love? Answer. The definition of love gives us an impression about the nature of its love for his beloved. This love, being perfect and divine, is unattainable, and fate is always hostile to this kind of love. Perfect lovers are never permitted by fate to be united. Regarding the hostility of fate, and the poet again says that this, just as a carpenter drives an iron wedge into a log of wood with a hammer, and by repeating the process, he is able to split the log into two parts. Similarly, fate pushes itself between the poet and his beloved and does everything to cause their separation. Thus, which is dictatorial in its decision would lose its power if the lovers were to achieve the fulfillment of their love. Thus, the union of these perfect lovers would mean the ruin of fate, because this union would set aside the supreme authority of fate. So the jealous fate has placed these two lovers as far apart from each other as the North Pole and the South Pole are from each other. These lovers can never come together in spite of the fact that they are the center around which the whole world of love revolves. Question 9. How does Marvell define love in his poem, the definition of love? Answer. In his poem, the definition of love, Andrew Marvell gives a Platonic idea of love. In this kind of love, there is the union of the two true minds, but the separation of the bodies. This love never allows physical union. By means of various analogies and arguments, the poet shows the rarity of the love existing between himself and his beloved. He assures that there is no possibility of any physical union between them. He says that because of jealousy, fate never allows him to be united with his beloved. A union between the two lovers will be a fatal blow to the power and authority of fate. So fate has placed these two lovers as far from each other as the North Pole and South Pole are. Using geometrical images, the poet says that the only oblique lines can meet each other in all geometrical angles, so also only guilty or illicit lovers can have the fulfillment of their passion. The love of the poet and that of his beloved are like parallel lines which can never meet even if they are infinitely stretched. does the lover of the poet, does the love of the poet and his beloved is only a union of the minds but not of the bodies. He defines this love by means of a poetic language as the conjunction of the mind and the opposition of the stars, that is bodies. This is a rather a divine or true love, which means the union of the two souls but separation of the two bodies. Thank you friends for watching my video.